The forest was silent that night, too silent. Even the crickets had stopped their song, as if the whole world was holding its breath. The moonlight fell in thin silver lines through the tall trees, and the cold air carried the smell of wet soil and pine. Daniel walked carefully, his boots sinking into the soft ground. He was a hunter, but not for sport. He lived alone at the edge of the forest, far from towns and cities. Food was scarce, and traps were the only way to survive. Tonight, one of his traps had been triggered. The sound had echoed through the trees, a faint metallic snap that only his trained ears could notice. He held his lantern high and stepped closer, his heart beating faster. Usually he caught rabbits or sometimes a wild boar. But this night felt different. The silence was too heavy, the air too tense. As he reached the clearing, he froze. The trap was no ordinary catch. Inside the steel jaws of the snare lay something alive, something not from this world. The creature struggled weakly, its body glowing faintly under the pale moon. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't human either. Long limbs, strange markings across its skin that shimmered like liquid silver, and eyes too large, too bright, reflecting his lantern like twin orbs. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. An alien. For a moment he thought he was dreaming, but the sharp hiss that came from the creature's mouth told him this was no dream. It was real, and it was caught in his trap. The alien pulled at the steel, but her strength was gone. Her body trembled. Blood, dark and strange, not red but almost purple, slid down her leg where the trap had bitten deep. Her eyes locked on him, wide, fearful, desperate. Don't hurt me." The words came broken, her voice shaking. It wasn't perfect English, but it was clear enough that Daniel froze, his lantern shaking in his hand. He had expected claws, fangs, or some violent attack. Instead, what he saw was fear. Not the fear of a predator, but of prey. The alien's breathing grew fast and shallow. Her hands, delicate, claw-tipped, trembled as she raised them slowly, like a prisoner surrendering. "Please, no pain." He felt his chest tighten. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't attacking. She was begging. Daniel knelt slowly, careful not to move too quickly. "I'm not going to hurt you," he sighed, his voice low, almost gentle. But the alien flinched as if his words were lies. Her body pressed back against the trap, and a soft sound escaped her throat, half sob, half growl. She was trembling all over, like an animal cornered by fire. He looked at the trap. The steel jaws had bitten deep into her leg. If he didn't help, she would bleed out. But if he opened it, she might attack. He swallowed hard, her eyes narrowed. She didn't trust him. Why should she? To her, he was the alien. To her, he was the danger. The silence stretched. The forest seemed to lean in, waiting for his choice. Then, Daniel placed his lantern on the ground and raised both hands slowly, showing he had no weapon. "I'm going to free you," he said. "But you have to stay still." The alien blinked, confused. Her lips trembled. "Free?" "Yes." Daniel nodded. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her glowing eyes studied him like she was trying to see inside his mind, to measure if his words carried truth. Then, weakly, she nodded. Daniel exhaled. He reached for the trap. The cold steel was stiff, rust biting into his fingers as he pulled. The alien winced, a cry of pain slipping past her lips. "Almost there," he muttered, forcing the trap open. With all his strength, the steel gave way, and her legs slipped free. She gasped, clutching her wound, purple blood staining her skin. Her body curled in on itself, still trembling. But her eyes, those wide, fearful eyes, watched him closely. Daniel stepped back, giving her space. He didn't want her to think this was a trick. She tried to stand, but her leg failed her, and she collapsed into the dirt with a sharp cry. He instinctively moved forward to help, but she hissed at him, baring her teeth. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with warning. Daniel raised his hands again, staying where he was. "All right. I'll stay back, but you're bleeding. You won't last the night like this." The alien shook her head, tears shining in her glowing eyes. "Better than being taken." "Taken? By who?" he asked, frowning. But she only shook her head, curling tighter, as if even the question was too dangerous. The forest groaned with the wind, and in that moment, Daniel realized something. She wasn't just lost. She wasn't just a stranger. She was running from something worse than him. And now, she was trapped in his world, with nowhere else to go. As Daniel stood in the cold night, lantern flickering, one thought chilled him. More than the wind. If he had found her this easily, others would too. And they might not be as merciful. The forest was quiet again, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, full of things unsaid, full of tension that neither of them could escape. Daniel sat near the dying lantern flame, watching the strange alien girl curl against the roots of a tree. She held her injured leg close, whispering sounds. He couldn't understand words in her language, soft and broken, like prayers. Her glowing eyes never left him, not once. Even when her body trembled with exhaustion, even when her breath came sharp and fast, she kept staring at him with that same look, fear mixed with suspicion. He knew that look. He had seen it before in wounded animals, the kind that thought every hand reaching out was meant to kill them. Daniel wanted to speak, to tell her again that he wouldn't hurt her, but words felt weak. Words couldn't erase the stories she must have been told about humans. Stories that painted men like him as monsters. So instead, he stayed still. The night grew colder. A harsh wind cut through the trees, and the alien shivered violently. Her skin pale with those strange glowing veins wasn't built for the forest's bite. Daniel reached into his pack and pulled out a rough wool blanket. Slowly, carefully, he placed it on the ground between them and pushed it across the dirt. With a stick, stopping a few feet from her, the alien's eyes narrowed. She looked at the blanket, then back at him, then at the blanket again. Her lips parted, and she whispered, "Trap?" Daniel shook his head. "No trap. Warmth." He tapped his chest, then wrapped his arms around himself to show her what he meant. She hesitated for what felt like forever. Then, weakly, she reached forward, her clawed fingers trembling, and pulled the blanket toward her. She wrapped it around her body, holding it tightly as if afraid it might vanish. For the first time, Daniel saw her eyes soften, just a little. Still, her hand never strayed far from the small blade hidden under her side. They sat in silence, the firelight flickering between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. "What's your name?" The alien blinked at him, confused. Her lips moved, repeating the sound. "Name?" Like she had never been asked before. "Yes," he nodded. "Name." She lowered her gaze, her voice fragile. "Kara." Daniel let the name settle in the air. "Kara," he repeated slowly, careful to say it the way she did. Her eyes flicked up to him in surprise. She hadn't expected him to respect it. Then she whispered something so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Humans don't ask names. Humans take." The word stabbed deeper than she could know. He felt a weight in his chest, realizing how deep her fear went. "I'm not like that," Daniel said firmly. "I don't take. I survive, and I don't hurt without reason." But she only shook her head, clutching the blanket tighter. "All lies. Humans, cruel. All say, then why am I helping you?" he asked quietly. Kara froze. Her eyes flickered with confusion, like she hadn't considered that. She searched his face, trying to read the truth. For a long while, there was only the sound of the wind and the crackle of his small fire. Finally, her voice broke, trembling. "Because you want something worse." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What do you think I want?" Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. But her trembling, the way she curled in tighter, told him enough. She expected pain. She expected chains. And yet, Here she was, still alive. He sighed, running a hand across his face. Kara, if I wanted to hurt you, I would have left you in that trap. Her breathing grew fast again. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. The silence between them was different now. Not empty, but heavy like a bridge being built one stone at a time. Then, suddenly, the forest shifted. A sound. A sharp crack of a branch in the distance. Daniel froze, every instinct screaming. He reached for his hunting knife, his eyes scanning the darkness. Kara's entire body tensed. She turned her head sharply, her glowing eyes wide with terror. No. She whispered. They come. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. Who? Her hand gripped the blanket tight, her voice shaking. Hunters, my hunters. The words chilled him. She wasn't just afraid of him, she was running from something else. Something dangerous enough to make her prefer bleeding in his trap than being taken alive. Daniel clenched his knife, staring into the black forest beyond the firelight. The wind carried faint echoes, voices, low and harsh, speaking in a language he didn't know. Kara's eyes found his, shining with a plea so desperate it cut straight into him. Please, she whispered. Don't let them take me. And, in that moment, Daniel knew, whatever choice he made next would change everything. The night had teeth. The crackle of Daniel's fire was swallowed by the forest's breath, broken only by faint voices drifting through the trees, harsh, guttural, inhuman. Words Daniel could not understand, but Kara did. Her eyes widened, her body stiff as stone. She pressed a hand over her mouth, silencing even her breathing. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, forgotten. They are close, she whispered, voice trembling. They smell me. Daniel gripped his hunting knife tighter. The fire's glow suddenly felt like a beacon, announcing their presence to anyone lurking beyond the trees. With quick movements, he kicked dirt over the flames until only thin smoke curled into the cold night. Darkness wrapped around them, thick and heavy. Kara's glowing veins pulsed faintly, betraying her in the dark. Daniel noticed and cursed under his breath. You're shining like a lantern. She shivered, trying to cover herself with the blanket again. I cannot stop it. My body, weak. The light comes when fear is strong. Daniel studied her for only a second, then pulled his heavy jacket off and threw it over her. The size nearly swallowed her, but it dimmed the glow. Her eyes flicked to him, startled. Why help me? He didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, he held a finger to his lips and pointed toward the sound of footsteps approaching. The forest came alive with movement. Shapes shifted between the trees' tall, armored figures, their eyes burning like coals in the dark. Daniel could see faint metal glinting where moonlight touched their weapons. Hunters, real hunters. Kara buried her face into the dirt, muffling a terrified sob. Daniel crouched low beside her, his heart pounding so hard he thought it would give them away. Alien voices grew louder. One of them stopped not 20 paces from their hiding place. A deep, guttural growl rolled out into the night, followed by words Kara seemed to understand. They say. Her voice cracked, so soft it was almost thought. They say if they find me, they will tear me apart. Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at her, this trembling fugitive, bleeding, terrified, and something inside him shifted. She wasn't his enemy. She was prey, cornered by monsters who looked at her like she was nothing, and he hated bullies. The hunters moved again, spreading wider. One of them walked dangerously close, scanning the ground with a strange device that hummed in his hands. Daniel leaned close to Kara's ear. Don't move, he breathed. She didn't. She didn't even breathe. The alien hunter paused, sniffing the air like a wolf. His glowing eyes cut through the darkness, scanning the ground. Daniel pressed his body lower, gripping his knife, his free hand curling over Kara's shoulder to steady her trembling. The hunter stepped, closer 10 paces, 7, 5. Kara's whole body tensed like a bowstring ready to snap. Her lips parted with a shaky whisper. "They see in heat. They will find us," Daniel thought quickly. His traps. He had laid several across the forest earlier. Crude but deadly snares, spikes, pits. They weren't built for aliens, but maybe they would work. Slowly he pointed toward the deeper woods. "We move," he mouthed. Kara shook her head violently, eyes wide with terror. "They'll kill us if we stay," he whispered. She looked into his eyes, searching for something: truth, courage, madness. Whatever she found, it silenced her. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her gently but firmly. Together, they crawled through the dirt, moving away from the approaching glow. The hunter paused, head tilting, but then turned the other way, following a different sound. They moved deeper into the forest, hearts thundering, breaths sharp. The further they went, the more Daniel's mind raced. He wasn't just saving her, he was dragging himself into a war he didn't understand. Finally, they reached the edge of one of his traps, a crude pit covered with branches. Daniel pressed Kara down behind a fallen log and whispered, "Stay here." Before she could protest, he slipped into the shadows, circling back. Moments later, one of the hunters appeared, his heavy boots crunching the leaves. He scanned the ground with his device, muttering in that harsh language. Step by step, he approached the pit. Daniel waited, breath tight. One more step. The ground gave way. The hunter roared as he crashed into the pit, metal armor clanging against hidden spikes. The sound echoed through the night, sharp and violent. The forest erupted with shouts. The other hunters surged toward the noise, weapons raised. Daniel rushed back to Kira, who was staring at him with wide, astonished eyes. You fight them?" she whispered, disbelief in her voice. "Looks like it," Daniel muttered, grabbing her hand. "Now run." Together, they sprinted through the trees, her limping body half supported by his strength. Behind them, alien roars shook the forest, angry and furious. Kara's heart hammered, but for the first time since her capture, the fear in her eyes was joined by something else, something she had never expected to feel toward a human. Hope. But that hope trembled as another sound split the night, a roar louder than the rest. Deeper, more powerful. Kara froze mid-step, her face drained of color. "No, they brought him." Daniel frowned, panting. "Who?" Her voice broke as she whispered the name of the hunter who never failed. The executioner. The forest shook with the roar. It wasn't just sound, it was weight. It rolled through the trees like thunder, rattling Daniel's chest and freezing Kara where she stood. Her glowing eyes widened, her lips trembling as she whispered again. "The executioner." Daniel tightened his grip on his knife. He didn't know what this executioner was, but the fear in Kara's voice told him everything. This wasn't just another hunter. This was the one they sent to end things. The normal hunters spread out, their armor clinking, their guttural language sharp in the cold night. They moved with purpose now, their rage fueled by the trap Daniel had sprung. Kara stumbled, her leg too weak. Daniel caught her, pulling her against a tree. "Stay low," he whispered. Her fingers clutched his sleeve, desperate. "You cannot fight him. He kills whole groups. He will tear you in two." Daniel looked at her, his jaw set. "Then we don't fight fair." He slipped into the shadows before she could protest. The executioner stepped into the clearing. And Daniel finally saw him. He was massive, taller than any human, broad as two men. His armor was black, scarred from countless battles, and his weapon looked like a hybrid between a blade and a spear, humming with strange energy. His helmet split open at the mouth, releasing a low, mechanical snarl. The lesser hunters parted. For him, like wolves giving way to an alpha, Kara's breath hitched. She pressed herself into the roots of the tree, trying to disappear. Her body glowed faintly through Daniel's jacket, betraying her. The executioner turned his head, his glowing eyes sweeping the dark. Then, with deliberate steps, he moved closer. Daniel crouched in the brush, his mind racing. He couldn't outmatch that thing in open combat, but the forest was his home. His traps were his teeth and claws. He gripped a rope tied to a bent sapling, pulled hard, and let it snap. A heavy log swung down from above, slamming into one of the hunters and knocking him off his feet with a roar. The others shouted, their voices sharp and angry. The executioner didn't flinch. He simply raised his hand, and with terrifying strength, he caught the swinging log mid-air, splintering it with one squeeze. Daniel's stomach turned cold. "Yeah," he muttered under his breath. "That's bad." The executioner barked an order, and the hunters spread wider, searching. Daniel moved quickly, silent as he could, circling toward Kara, but one of the hunters spotted him. The alien roared and charged. Daniel spun, ducked low, and slashed with his knife. The blade cut deep across the alien's leg, enough to stagger it. Before it could recover, Daniel shoved it into one of his spike pits. The ground collapsed, and the hunter fell with a sickening crunch. Kara gasped from her hiding place, her eyes wide. She had never seen a human fight like this, not with strength, but with cunning. Daniel grabbed her hand, pulling her up. "Move!" They stumbled through the trees, branches whipping past their faces. Behind them, the executioner roared again, a sound that seemed to split the forest itself. They reached a narrow ravine where the ground dipped sharply. Daniel shoved Kara behind a boulder. "Stay here." She grabbed his arm. "No, he will kill you. Please run." Daniel pulled free, his eyes hard. "If we run, he'll catch us. If we fight smart, maybe we live." Before she could stop him, he disappeared into the trees again. Kara pressed her hands over her mouth, shaking. She wanted to believe him, but she knew what the executioner had done to her people. Entire groups of fugitives slaughtered in hours. But then she remembered the way Daniel had looked at her, the way he had risked himself again and again when he had no reason to. He wasn't like others. He was something else. The executioner entered the ravine, his heavy steps echoing. He moved with certainty, like a predator that knew the prey had nowhere else to run. Daniel was waiting. He loosed another trap. A net made of wire and sharp hooks dropped from above, tangling two hunters and dragging them screaming into the air. Daniel used the moment to strike, lunging from the shadows and driving his knife deep into a third hunter's throat. Purple blood sprayed the rocks. But then the executioner turned, his glowing eyes locked on Daniel. The massive alien charged, faster than something his size should be. Daniel barely leapt aside as the spear slammed into the ground, cracking stone. The shockwave threw him back, his knife skittering away. Daniel hit the dirt hard, his chest burning. He looked up just in time to see the executioner raising his weapon for the killing blow. "Daniel!" Kara's voice ripped through the night. The executioner paused, turning toward her hiding place. His helmet split in a grin of cruel delight. The prey had revealed itself. Kara realized too late what she had done. The monster had seen her. And now, the executioner's spear was pointed at her heart. The spear cut through the air like thunder. Kara braced for the strike, her body frozen. But at the last second, Daniel threw himself forward, grabbing a burning branch from the fallen fire. He swung it hard into the executioner's helmet. The flame burst across the alien's visor, blinding him for a split second. The spear struck the rock instead, sending sparks flying. "Run!" Daniel shouted. Kara stumbled to her feet, pain shooting up her wounded leg. She wanted to scream, to collapse, but Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her into the shadows before the executioner could recover. They crashed through the forest, branches tearing at their skin, the roars of the hunters echoing behind them. The night felt endless, every step heavier, every breath sharper. Finally, Daniel pulled her into a narrow cave hidden behind a wall of roots. They collapsed inside, both panting, their bodies shaking with exhaustion. The sounds of the hunters faded. though the memory of their roars still burned in Kara's ears. For a long while, there was only silence. Daniel leaned back against the stone, sweat dripping down his face. His chest rose and fell in heavy breaths, his hand still gripping the half-burned branch like a weapon. Kara curled into herself, clutching her bleeding leg. The blanket was gone, lost in the chase. Her glow returned, faint but enough to make the cave shimmer with eerie light. Daniel glanced at her, then at the wound. "That needs cleaning," he said. She shook her head violently. "No, stay away," he frowned. "You'll die if I don't." Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter with distrust. Better to die free than live as slave. Daniel's jaw tightened. He understood enough. She thought every hand that touched her wanted chains. He tossed the burned stick aside and pulled a small pouch from his belt. From it, he poured water into his hand and showed it to her. "Not chains, just this, clean." Kara's eyes flickered, uncertain. Her claws pressed against the stone, ready to strike if he came too close. Slowly, carefully, Daniel crawled forward. Keeping his movements calm, he reached for her leg. She flinched, a soft hiss escaping her lips. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm not your hunter." Her breathing quickened. He pressed the water against the wound, washing away the dark purple. "Blood." She winced, biting down on her lip to stop the cry. For a moment, their eyes met his steady, hers trembling. And in that fragile silence, something shifted. Kara whispered, almost too soft to hear. "Why?" Daniel didn't look up from her. "Leg. Because you're not my enemy." Her lips parted, but no words came. She stared at him as if he was breaking every rule of her world. When he finished, he wrapped the wound with strips of cloth torn from his own shirt, his rough human. Hands moved gently, almost careful not to hurt her more. Kara couldn't stop staring. She had been hunted, beaten, trapped and caged before. No one had ever touched her like this, with patience, with care. Her chest ached in a strange way, a way she didn't understand. "You risked your life," she whispered. "For me." Daniel finally met her gaze. "Yeah, guess I did." The cave grew still again. The glow from her body reflected in his eyes, casting shadows across the stone. The air between them felt charged, dangerous, fragile, alive. Kara shifted, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. She wanted to push him away, to keep the wall high between them. But her body betrayed her, leaning ever so slightly toward. The warmth he carried. Her voice trembled as she said, "If they find us again, you will die." Daniel smirked faintly, though his eyes stayed serious. "Then we make sure they don't." For the first time, Kara let out a sound that wasn't fear or pain. It was small, almost like a laugh, but broken and unsure. She covered her mouth quickly, as if ashamed. Daniel tilted his head. "What's so funny?" Kara's eyes shimmered. "I never thought a human could sound so foolish or so brave." They sat in silence, both staring into the darkness of the cave. The forest outside whispered with wind and distant voices. Then Kara spoke again, softer than before. "If I stay with you, I bring death to you." Daniel's answer came without hesitation. "Then I'll face it." Her eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know if he was mad, or if this was simply humanity's curse, the stubborn refusal to give up, even when the universe demanded surrender. And for the first time since she had fallen into his trap, Kara wondered if maybe this human was the only chance she had to live. But before the fragile bond between them could settle, a new sound echoed from deep in the forest. Not the shouts of hunters. A long, low horn. Kara's blood ran cold. She clutched Daniel's arm with sudden force. "They call for the hounds," Daniel frowned. "Hounds?" Her voice broke, full of terror. "Creatures that never stop until they taste blood." The cave suddenly felt smaller, the night heavier. Bond they had just formed would be tested sooner than either of them imagined. The horn's echo rolled across the forest. deep and haunting. It didn't fade, it lingered, like the cry of something ancient and merciless. Kara's fingers dug into Daniel's arm. Her whole body trembled, her glowing veins pulsing brighter. "With fear, they've released the hounds," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "They will not stop. Not until one of us is dead." Daniel's stomach tightened. He didn't need an explanation. He could hear them already, low growls, carried by the wind. Too many legs pounding the ground, too fast to be natural. He stood quickly, gripping his knife. "Then we move." Kara shook her head. "You don't understand. They smell through stone, through water. There is no escape." Daniel crouched, meeting her terrified eyes. "Maybe there's no escape for others, but you're with me." She wanted to argue, to scream at his foolishness. But the steel in his voice stopped her. For the first time in her hunted life, someone spoke like she was worth saving. They stumbled out of the cave, Kara leaning against him, her leg burning with pain. The forest stretched wide and endless before them, moonlight pouring through the canopy in fractured beams. The growls grew louder. The first hound broke through the brush behind them. And Daniel finally saw it. It wasn't a dog, or even anything. Close. Its body was long and lean, its skin stretched tight over bone, glowing with the same alien light as Kara's veins. Its mouth unhinged wider than nature should allow, lined with teeth that shimmered like metal. 4 red eyes locked on them, burning with hunger. Kara gasped, pressing into Daniel's side. "Run!" They ran. Branches snapped against their faces as they tore through the forest. Daniel's lungs burned, his legs screaming, but he refused to slow. Behind them, the sound of claws tearing earth grew closer. Kara stumbled, her wounded leg giving way. She fell forward with a cry, but Daniel caught her mid-fall and pulled her back to her feet. He didn't let go. More hounds burst from the shadows, their growls overlapping in a chorus of death. Daniel's mind raced. His traps were far behind them now. Here, in open forest, he had nothing but wit. Then his eyes caught the faint shimmer of water ahead. A river, rushing fast, its surface glittering with moonlight. "Hold on," he said through gritted teeth. They reached the edge as the hounds closed in. Daniel didn't hesitate. He grabbed Kara's hand and jumped. The icy water swallowed them whole, dragging them down into its furious current. Kara struggled, her glowing body lighting the depths. Daniel wrapped an arm around her and kicked hard, letting the current pull them downstream. The hounds didn't stop. They leapt into the water after them, their 4 eyes glowing beneath the surface. Daniel's chest burned as he fought for breath. He forced Kara upward, breaking the surface just long enough to suck in air before the current dragged them down again. "Daniel!" she cried, water choking her voice. "They're here!" He turned. One of the hounds was swimming straight toward them, its jaws open wide. Daniel thrust his knife forward underwater. The blade tore into its throat, purple blood clouding the water. The creature thrashed violently before sinking into the dark, but more followed. They were thrown against rocks as the current carried them faster. Daniel's arms ached, his lungs screaming, but he didn't let go of Kara. Finally, the river hurled them out into a wide pool. They dragged themselves onto the shore, gasping for breath. Kara collapsed onto the dirt, coughing water, her body trembling. Daniel knelt beside her, chest heaving. The growls came again. The hounds were climbing out of the river. Daniel's knife was gone, lost in the current. He searched wildly, his eyes landing on a thick branch nearby. He grabbed it, holding it like a spear. His hands bled, his body ached, but he stood between Kara and the advancing beasts. Kara's voice shook. You'll die." Daniel's grip tightened on the branch. His eyes burned with fire. "Not while you're behind me." The first hound lunged. Daniel thrust the branch forward with all his strength, jamming it into the beast's mouth. It thrashed, snapping the wood in half, but the impact bought a few precious seconds. The others circled, growling, their eyes fixed on the glowing fugitive behind him. Kara stared at Daniel's back, her heart pounding. No human had ever stood against death for her. And now, even drenched, bleeding, and weaponless, this man was ready to die to keep her alive. Her chest ached not with fear, but with something she had never felt before. Something dangerous. Her trembling lips whispered his name. Daniel. Before he could turn, a shadow fell over them, both. Not a hound. The executioner. He stood at the edge of the clearing, water dripping from his black armor, his massive spear glowing with energy. His eyes locked on Kira, and his voice rumbled like stone breaking. Mine. The hounds fell silent. The night itself seemed to bow to his presence. Daniel's knuckles turned white around the broken branch. Kara's glow pulsed wildly, torn between terror and hope. The chase was over. The true battle was about to begin. The clearing went silent. The hounds crouched low, their red eyes flickering, waiting for the order. The executioner stood tall, water dripping from his black armor, his massive spear humming with deadly energy. His glowing eyes locked on Kara like a predator eyeing prey already claimed. Daniel stepped forward, a broken branch clutched in his bleeding hands. He was drenched, exhausted, weaponless, but he didn't move aside. Kara's breath caught. Her voice broke in a whisper. You cannot fight him. He is death itself. Daniel didn't look back at her. His eyes stayed on the executioner. Then let's see if death bleeds. The executioner roared, the sound shaking the trees. He swung his spear, the energy blade slicing through the air. Daniel ducked just in time, the weapon carving a glowing scar into the earth where he had stood. The force threw him back, but he rolled to his feet, grabbing a sharp stone from the ground. He hurled it at the executioner's face. It bounced harmlessly off the black helmet. The alien laughed, a deep metallic growl. Weak, human, but Daniel wasn't aiming to kill. He was aiming to distract. While the executioner's attention flickered, Daniel sprinted toward the riverbank. His mind raced. He couldn't match power with power. But this forest was his. He needed to use it. Kara, he shouted. Trust me, crawl to the tree line. She hesitated, terror in her eyes. But then she saw the fire in his face. The same fire that had carried him this far. With trembling limbs, she obeyed, dragging herself toward the shadows. The executioner noticed. His head snapped toward her. He raised his spear. Daniel charged, slamming into the giant's side. The strike barely shifted the armored monster, but it was enough. The spear missed Kara, scorching the ground instead. The executioner turned back, grabbing Daniel by the throat. He lifted him easily into the air, squeezing. Daniel's vision blurred, air vanishing from his lungs. Kara screamed, but Daniel smiled through the pain. His free hand gripped something, one of his snares, wire-thin and razor-sharp, which he had looped around the executioner's arm during the tackle. With his last strength, Daniel yanked. The wire snapped tight around the alien's joints, grinding against armor. The executioner snarled, throwing Daniel to the ground. But the distraction gave Daniel just enough time to grab a jagged rock and slam it against the warrior's knee joint. Sparks burst. The massive alien staggered for the first time. Daniel spat blood, crawling back. Looks like death limbs, too. The hounds growled, ready to strike. The executioner barked an order in his guttural tongue, and two of them leapt forward. Kara's glowing eyes widened. She couldn't just watch. Her claws dug into the earth, fury mixing with fear. Enough! She screamed, her voice echoing with strange power. For the first time, her glow wasn't just fear, it was fire. The hounds paused, confused by the sudden burst of light. The executioner turned his head toward her, and Daniel struck. Using the broken branch like a spear, Daniel shoved it deep into the already damaged joint. The executioner roared, falling to one knee. The forest shook with the sound. Daniel staggered to Kara's side, pulling her up. We run. Now. She stared at him in shock, her voice trembling. You stood against him. No human should have survived that. Daniel smirked faintly, though his body shook from pain. Guess I'm not just any human. The executioner tried to rise, but his knee collapsed again, sparks flying from the damaged armor. He bellowed orders, but the hounds hesitated, unsettled by Kara's blazing glow and Daniel's defiance. For the first time, the hunters weren't certain who truly had the advantage. Daniel and Kara stumbled deeper into the forest until the sounds of pursuit faded. They collapsed at the base of an ancient tree, both gasping for air. Kara turned to him, her eyes shimmering. All my life I was told humans were cruel, monsters. But you, she swallowed hard, her voice breaking. You bleed for me. Daniel chuckled weakly, leaning his head back against the bark. Bleeding's kind of what we do best. Her claws trembled as she reached out, hesitating before touching his hand. The contact was small, fragile, but real. For the first time, there was no fear in her eyes. Only wonder. You are not weak, she whispered. You are not cruel. You are hope. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. And you're not prey, not anymore. The night around them was still dangerous. The executioner was wounded, but not gone. The hunters would come again. But in that moment, under the broken moonlight, something stronger than fear bound them together. A dangerous bond had become something unbreakable. And the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, had just been warned. Humanity was full of surprises,